Hi, this is a Minute of Overpass. My name is Eric and I make apps. Now this week I want to talk about working with remote teams. Alright, so a few months ago I got a call from a salesperson and he was selling something. I think it was like advertising space or something like that. I can't remember exactly what he was selling, but he said something that was really funny. He said, our company covers the Oxfordshire area, and we were looking at Wantage. And since you're like one of the biggest companies in Wantage, we thought we should reach out to you. And I laughed because I said, you're one of the biggest companies in Wantage, and I said, dude, it's just me. This is a one-person company. And it made me laugh, because then he tried to cover up for it. He goes, oh, well, your website looks like it's a much bigger company. So I guess you don't need whatever it was he needed. So I said no, I thanked him, and he went away. Right. So now the truth is, Overpass is not just a one-person company, but I am the one employee. So what we have is like a remote team. So, which is the way that I prefer to do things. It's the way I prefer to do things all the way through. And my whole vision for Overpass when starting out all those years ago was to be, completely remote. Not have, I don't have any interest in being the boss. The reason I say I make apps and I'm not the president and founder of Overpass is because I'm more concerned with producing software. Like, I want to keep the production of apps going out there and try to bring in revenue that way. And even when we do stuff for clients, I'm more concerned with actually producing the software and keeping costs as low as we can. So at the moment we have a team of 5, and most people they're all working from home, mostly in the Philippines. But what I thought I'd do this week is kind of go through some of the ways that we set up this remote team and some of the failures that I've had in the past, because man, I've had loads, right? It's almost funny, because the amount of people who told me over the years, say, why don't you just hire somebody local? And it's been like trial and error to get things working and to get things running as smoothly as they are now. Right. And right now I am in an office, so I do have an office in Wantage above a shop, and the reason I moved from my home into the office it wasn't so much because it was hard to work at home. It was more like I got the feeling that everyone was getting tired of me being there all the time. So I moved to an office, and occasionally clients will come in, or even people will just come in and they'll have their app idea. And usually, this office has just become my space. So I'll be like, there's crumbs everywhere. I'll be kicking like Amazon boxes under the desk and trying to tidy up real quick. But for the most part, it's just a place that I could go and work and be uninterrupted. And from morning till night, and all that kind of stuff, and it's really, really nice. However, so there's been like 3 ways over the years that I've worked with remote developers, and it's been various levels of success. The first one is something we use all the time, and you might do as well, is to hire like a freelancer from something like oDesk, or it used to be oDesk or eLance, and now it's just Upwork. And that's really good for like if you're gonna get somebody for like a short-term project. Like a couple weeks ago, I hired an Indonesian voice actor to read some of the lines on one of our games, Indonesian Bubble Bath, which came out a few weeks ago. And we'll do that a lot, especially for translation work, even development work for really small projects. So it's really hard to find somebody who's really skilled but has like a big chunk of time to put aside for something like that. So and Upwork, it's had its ups and downs. For the most part, it's been okay for me, but I stick to translation and voice acting. When I've done it with development, it hasn't gone well, but that's just finding the right people. There's a lot of trial and error there. The nice thing about Upwork is that you have reviews from other people. So like if you're going to hire somebody, you can see what other people have said about them before you actually leave a review. My biggest problem with that was I think when we first started, we did a game called Agent X. We have a game called Agent X, and I found an artist who did like really good graphics on it, and he did all the stills, and we had like a comic book type of thing, and he was really good. His name was Francisco Maldonado. I highly recommend him. But he didn't know how to do like the sprites. So sprites are the animation. So we have one scene where we have the the agents running, and I just wanted silhouettes to keep it easy. And I hired a designer. He was in the Philippines for the short job, and he spent ages. He was like 3 or 4 weeks overdue with it, so we're just waiting for these running sprites. And ideally what I wanted was running, jumping, diving, that kind of stuff. I finally got a running man sprite, and it was terrible. It didn't even gel right. It was just like, like when I ran it through, the code and everything, he wasn't even running. There was major frame skipping and all that kind of stuff. In the end, I had to hire somebody else, and the second time it wasn't that good either. A few years later, we got it redone by one of our permanent developers, and then it went okay. But yeah, Upwork could be like a mixed bag, but the nice thing is you have those reviews, and for like small projects, that's really good. Now, the second way that we've done offshore teams is actually having a dedicated team overseas. So my first team doing apps was an Indian development team, and again, some people will say, well, Indian development companies are bad, or they're good, or whatever. And it really is, a good developer is a good developer, no matter where they are. You got good developers in India, you got bad developers in India, you got good developers in the Philippines or in England or whatever, and you got bad developers too. And you really have to. It takes a while to find good people. So, but this one company, it was like a dedicated team. So they said, okay, we'll give you like I think it was 4 dedicated people for the month for this amount. And then, I think at one point I had 7 people in this team, and it went okay, but they just didn't have a lot of experience. So they didn't know certain things. So I would give them, I'll give them things to read, or I'll give them courses to take. And so they would start to build up their skills a little bit. And I'll tell you, after 3 months of having this team, they raised the prices on me. The development company did. So basically what I was doing was building the knowledge of this team that knowledge, that growth didn't actually belong to my company, because it was part of another team. So they raised the price. I argued. But I went with it anyway because it was such a low price to begin with. And then a few months later, they raised the price again. And at that point, I just left. I just said, no, you know what? I'm not going to do it. Which is actually, I think I've done this, my 3 rules of outsourcing. Always own the code, right? Don't ever have your source code with somebody else, that they have that over you, that you can't just walk away from that. So I did. I walked away. I said, no, I'm not interested. And then they lowered the price, and then they kept coming back, and I think I did hire them later on for small jobs and stuff like that. But once the trust was gone, and I think they kept raising the price. However, that was just this company. For some people, I'm sure it works really well. But that wasn't really a remote team. That wasn't really how I wanted things to go, because that team was it was a group of people all sitting in an office, in their office in Ahmedabad, India. And so in terms of being a remote team, the only person remote was me, because I was in England, right? So in the end, that didn't quite work that well. But it worked okay, right? So a lot of it came down to me making mistakes, getting people to do the right things, and also realizing that every bit I invested in their education was not investing in my company, it was investing in somebody else's company, right? So now the third way we do it, and the way that I prefer to do it, if we could do it, is just having like full-time freelancers. So right now we have 4 full-time freelancers in the Philippines. So everybody works from home. They've got schedules that are varying, and I think I'll do another video about how we work that, because that's been a lot of ups and downs there too. So what I'll do is I'll hire somebody, and as a full-time person. So the person who's been with me the longest is Sandy, our designer. She's been with me for over 2 years, and it was so hard to find a designer in the early days of app development. That's the one thing I can't do. Once we found Sandy, we just kept her. But for these 4 people, I must have hired about 20 people over the years. And it's getting faster, where you get burned a lot, when you do this kind of thing. People will say, you've been, scammed or cheated or whatever. And it's one of these things where, in my mind, you have to go through 5 or 6 people to find a really good person. So 3 weeks ago, I hired somebody. I hired him on a temporary basis for a week to see as a trial. I always pay in the beginning, right? This is one of the things with overseas developers is, a lot of times they don't get paid, so there's a lot of mistrust there. So I think, okay, I'll pay in advance, right? I'm going to pay you for the next week. If it works out, we'll do another week, and then we could go to monthly, right? So I always pay in the beginning, so that way, there's no reason to hold back, and it's their job to lose, right? So I hired a guy on. I hired him. He started on a Monday. I let him go on a Tuesday, right? It was that quickly. Whereas before, in the early days, I've actually had people for 6-7 weeks, sometimes even a few months, and then realized, this guy's not going anywhere. And it was sort of growing as I go. Right? It was like, you try to think, well, he says he's working on it. He hasn't checked in the code in a while, but I just need to get him to check in and stuff like that. It's just really hard to get to push forward on there. So, and I've had developers who I've hired, and they'll be working, and I'll give them a course, and they'll learn, like Corona SDK was a Lua, which is something that I couldn't find a good developer on. So I hired a guy. He took this course, and then pretty soon I went back to this jobs website that I had hired him from, and I did a search, and then I found a bunch of people with this skill, right? And I went back and I looked at it, and it was this guy, right? He used different names. He had the same picture for everyone, or he had different pictures, but different. Like one was his graduation picture, one was his, other pictures. There was a bunch of him. So I thought, God, this guy, he's got like multiple profiles. He's probably working multiple jobs. That's why he's so slow. In retrospect, this kind of stuff, it was a hard learning lesson, right? It was a hard lesson to learn, to make sure that if you hire somebody on a full-time basis, you make sure that they're not working multiple jobs. Because, I've had people who seem to assume they can work 3 full-time jobs, right? 8-hour days, which, you actually can't. So in the end, I fired him, and he pleaded with me. He said, no, those were just in case, those profiles. Oh, the other one, so it was a bunch of him, and there was one of a young lady. I looked at it, but it looked a lot like the same skills that this other guy just gained. So I went and I did a search of her name. It came up with a Facebook page. I clicked on the Facebook page, and there's a picture of her with this guy. So this guy, Louis. Oh, it was a really bad experience. That was one of those ones where you just want to chuck in the towel. But, like I said, you have to go through a lot of these. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who say, oh yeah, we tried offshoring, or we tried outsourcing, and it just didn't work, right? You just don't get the same quality as you do as you get somebody locally. And a lot of the times it doesn't work, but you have to keep going through there. It's trial and error, right? If I could go through 5 or 6 people, but I could find somebody really well that I really work well with, and they can help, we could just keep churning out these apps to keep doing this kind of stuff, then that's really beneficial to me. So anyway, so that's it for this week. I just want to talk about those 3 ways. There's Upwork, there's a dedicated team, or through another company, like say another development company, and then there's hiring freelancers to work on their own. My preference is hiring freelancers at the moment, although we do still do work with with development companies, right? Because if we have a big client project, we'll go with them just because it's easier than trying to find the right people at the right time, or if my developers are already too busy. And I like the idea that everybody works from home, right? So I spent too many years putting on a suit, getting on a train, going into London, sitting at a desk, doing a job that I could easily have done from home and had more family time. And even when we do Google Hangouts and meetings, you could hear kids in the background and stuff like that, which I don't mind. I actually kind of like that. I like the idea that I could get somebody who's happy working from home, and as long as they produce. My whole thing is not to look professional. I want to execute. I want to produce more software, and that's really the bottom line for me. I don't want to be the boss. I want Overpass to keep producing apps, and I want to keep that revenue coming in. So that's it for this week. A bit long-winded. I think next week what I might do is talk about some of the tools that we use with the remote team. Now, I know remote teams is not something that's specifically app related, so let me know if you'd rather me go back to AdMob or something like that. But this is something that, as your app gets bigger, it becomes more difficult to do everything on your own, and you need help. And one of the ways you could do that is by hiring a few freelancers to work for you on a regular basis. So So that's it for this week. I hope it's been helpful. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and to comment. And you know, that's it. I'll talk to you next week.